Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. Today's session is on rescuing food in a throwaway culture, brought to you by the Food and Beverage Business Accelerator Program. My name is Emily, and I'm a food scientist with Perennia Food and Agriculture. We are Nova Scotia's only development agency with a focus on agriculture and seafood. We offer services in food safety, agriculture extension, mobile wine bottling, and analytical testing of cannabis foods and beverages. Our innovation team works with clients on product development, process improvement, nutritional labeling, and shelf life determination. Today's guest presenters are here with us today from Second Harvest, which is Canada's largest food rescue organization. We will be hearing from Krish Thayalan, their Manager of Education and Training on Food Waste Research and Statistics. We also have with us Michael Hardy, who's Head of Operations here in the Maritimes, and will bring some insight into what is happening in Atlantic Canada. We will have some time for questions, so please submit them using the Q&A button, and I'll be moderating them later at the end of the presentation. And we're also going to be having some interactive polls, so be ready to answer those. And with that, I'll pass it off to you, Krish and Michael.
Thank you so much, Emily. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and hopefully you'll all be able to see it clearly. Thank you to everyone for joining us today. As Emily mentioned, my name is Krish. I'm our Manager of Education and Training here at Second Harvest, and I'm joined as well by my colleague, Mike Hardy, our incredible Head of Operations for Maritimes. Before I begin, I just wanted to give a huge thank you to our friends at Perennia Food and Agriculture for having us today. And we're so excited to talk to you about a topic that is near and dear to us here at Second Harvest, which is rescuing surplus food in a throwaway culture. I know we've all been feeling the impact of food inflation, whether we're from a food business or whether we're talking about our families. And for some of us, it's the difference between having a meal or not. The link between food inflation and food insecurity in Canada is being felt now more than ever. And the issue goes straight to the heart of Second Harvest's vision of no waste, no hunger, a vision that we're determined to achieve. To give you just a breakdown of what we'll be talking about today, I'll go into a little bit about Second Harvest and why we do what we do. I'll dive into some highlights from our wasted opportunity research. And finally, I'll pass it off to Mike to talk about our operations and how we put this research into practice. If you haven't heard of Second Harvest before, we are Canada's largest food rescue organization. Now, not everyone is familiar with the term food rescue or food recovery. In a nutshell, what that is taking food that would otherwise go to landfill and using it for other purposes. So for us, we take this food and we rescue it for not-for-profit programs across Canada so that they can continue to do the great work that they're doing to feed Canadians. There's lots of great work being done by charitable food programs to rescue and redistribute shelf-stable and non-perishable foods. We're all familiar with things like food drives and have likely donated to food programs before. Our focus is not only on non-perishable foods, but we really try to focus on providing perishable foods like fruits, vegetables, and proteins, including dairy. These are the foods that we know are most essential for promoting health, but they're also the most difficult to obtain for people experiencing hunger, both because they can be more costly and because the traditional food bank system isn't really made to safely transport and store these items at scale. We're also focused on our dual mission, which is hunger relief, but also reducing the environmental impact of food waste. So I'm going to put a question to everyone in the room here. And Emily, if you don't mind launching the first poll, the question is, what percentage of food in Canada would you guess goes to landfill each year? So there's a number of ranges that you can see on the poll option there. And I'll just wait for everyone's responses to come in. Again, the question is, what percentage of food in Canada would you guess goes to landfill each year? Is it 0 to 20%? Is it between 21 and 40, 41 and 60, 61 and 80, or even higher than that? Amazing. So it looks like it's about almost a 50-50 split between 21 to 40 and 41 to 60. So let's see how many of you folks got it right. So 58% of food produced in Canada is lost or wasted each year, which is rather unfortunate for a couple of reasons. One is that we're in the middle of a hunger crisis here in Canada. We know that food insecurity has increased dramatically over the last few years because of a little thing called COVID-19, when at the same time we have enough food in the Canadian food system to feed every Canadian for 5 months for free. At the same time, we have 1 in 6 Canadians reporting that they're experiencing some level of food insecurity. So that tells us that we don't have an issue with the amount of food in Canada. The issue comes down to distribution and our ability to recover that food. But we have to think beyond hunger as well. We know that when food goes to landfill, it ends up in the perfect environment for it to break down into methane gas instead of carbon dioxide. And we know that methane gas burns 25 times hotter than carbon dioxide. So food waste leads to greenhouse gas emissions, which leads to global warming, which leads to multiple other things like climate change, habitat destruction, soil erosion, water contamination, you name it. In fact, if we were to look at food wastage as a country, it would be the 3rd largest greenhouse gas emitter after only China and the United States. So how are we addressing this at Second Harvest? One of the things that we do is conducting research. So we conduct this research to get a better understanding of the realities of the Canadian food system. And this is to ensure that we can develop common sense, but more importantly, collaborative solutions to food waste. Today's report, Wasted Opportunity, is our 3rd report in a series that began with the avoidable crisis of food waste that you see on the left there. The avoidable crisis of food waste is a roadmap which shows how almost 9 million metric tons of food is lost or wasted by the industry each year. The second report, Canada's Invisible Food Network, was the first report to reveal the massive invisible patchwork of over 61,000 community organizations that distribute food to people in need. If you want some more information on these, you can head to our website at secondharvest.ca/research, and you can find both of our reports there. But today's focus will be on our 3rd report, Wasted Opportunity. In this research, we identified how much surplus edible food is being wasted across the supply chain and why. And that's food that could and should be used for its highest intended purpose of feeding people. The research is important because it identifies the number of food businesses across the country, the types of surplus edible food that's being wasted, and where that surplus edible food is coming from. It also seeks to understand why so much of this surplus edible food is not being rescued and redistributed to people. And finally, it proposes solutions that turn edible food waste into opportunity for everyone involved. So let's dive into our findings here. We learned from the research that there are over 127,000 food businesses in Canada. These businesses range across the supply chain from growers to fisheries to food processors to manufacturers to wholesalers, you name it. And we were able to conclude that 45%, or almost 60,000 of them, are likely to have surplus edible food. That's food that is good to eat, but it's extra. It could be that the crop is larger than the contracted amount. It could be that it's not sellable due to exclusivity agreements. But at the end of the day, a surplus apple is still edible and has the same nutritional value as an apple that you and I might buy from the supermarket. So I wanted to get a little bit of an idea of who's in the room today. If you could let me know with this next poll, do you have surplus edible food at your business? So you'll see the poll has been launched. Thank you very much, Emily. And if you're not from a food business, you can feel free to hit not applicable. Give everyone a few more seconds just to respond to that poll. Again, the question is, how much monthly surplus edible food would you estimate that you have at your business or organization? And again, that's per month. Wonderful. So I'm seeing that of the food businesses that are here in the room, there's about 26% of everyone in the room that has less than 1 ton per month, and about 5% that has more than 1 ton per month. Thanks so much for your responses. So let's take a look at what we found in terms of how much surplus food there is at different types of businesses. We broke down the data that we found by the type of food business and the quantity of surplus edible food that they report having. Now, I should say that this data is self-reported, so we actually believe these numbers are an underestimation. But what we found is that wholesalers and farms are most likely to have more than 1 ton of produce in a month, whereas the hospitality, restaurant, and retail industries are most likely to have surplus in general. And we know that this rings through across the country. In our findings, we found that Ontario and Quebec have the most surplus edible food, and that makes sense because they're the largest populations and have the largest number of food businesses. But there's a significant opportunity to rescue surplus food in all regions. We also looked at surplus food by food category, which allows us to compare between what's available and what charitable food programs actually need. We found that every category of food is being produced in excess by our food system. And much of this food is actually perishable and is of the richest nutritional value. As we found in our previous research report, the Invisible Food Network, it's also the type of food that's in shortest supply at the thousands of charitable food organizations feeding people experiencing hunger. So I'm going to ask another question to everyone in the room. What percent of all the available surplus edible food do you think is rescued to feed people? So of all the surplus edible food that we have, what percent of it is actually being rescued in Canada? Amazing. So I'm seeing 90% of people are saying between 0 to 20%, and that is exactly right. When you add it all up, we conservatively estimate that Canada's food system produces about 3.2 million tons of surplus edible food per year. Of the 3.2 million tons, about 3.1 of those tons goes to destinations like landfill, instead of being rescued and donated. If you consider that a refrigerated transport truck can hold about 25 tons of food, this is enough to fill 124,000 tractor truckloads, or the equivalent of over 6 billion meals. That could provide every Canadian with a meal a day for 5 months. So most of you said 0 to 20% is actually being rescued, and that's absolutely correct. Only 4% of all the food that's surplus and edible is being rescued and redistributed. The other 96% of surplus edible food is being wasted when it could be redistributed to people who need food. The fact that this is happening, given the times that we all live in, is both tragic and disheartening. We have an opportunity and an obligation to support Canadians with this healthy food. Food inflation and supply chain woes continue to make things challenging, both for food businesses and the average Canadian family, 60% of which said recently that they're finding it difficult to feed their families. We have an obligation because Canada's Invisible Food Network indicated that 6.7 million Canadians relied on food charity. That's 18% of our population and growing. So why is all this food waste happening? Why aren't we using it to redistribute to people in need? It depends on a number of factors. It could be the type of food your business deals with, your geographical location, the size of your business, but more importantly, infrastructure and policy. We know that the food system is built to move in one way, from picking to processing to packaging to selling and serving food. It operates in this linear fashion. Production lines are continuous, they run at high volume, and margins are tight, so there's a need for cost efficiency. On top of that, the regulatory compliance for safe food handling is also a factor. Storage capacity, particularly for frozen or for refrigerated foods, is both limited and costly. Meanwhile, the charitable food sector has limited financial and logistical resources to quickly and efficiently support the rescue and redistribution of surplus edible food. So to shift these perceptions, we need both financial and logistical solutions to turn the food system into a more circular process versus a linear one. Speaking of financial incentives, we know that Canada's food industry makes profits and pays wages only from the production, distribution, and sale of food. So it's natural to view the donation of surplus food as less important than our commercial interests. In the hope of capturing cents on the dollar, most businesses will retain their food until it gets close to its best before date and then dispose of it at the cheapest possible cost. Surplus edible food is considered a budget item, and businesses assume that the donation of food will be more costly than its disposal at a landfill. And depending where businesses are on the food chain, this will determine whether the lack of financial incentive is legitimate. Let's take farming, for example. In farming, margins are thin, and that lets us know that why this market is less inclined to rescue and redistribute this great food, because there's a need for a financial incentive in order to encourage them to donate. We also heard from businesses that there's concerns around the legal liability of someone becoming ill from donated food, particularly perishable food. But these concerns are unfounded. In every part of Canada, there's some legislation to protect companies and individuals who donate food rather than throwing it away. Furthermore, there's no documented case in Canada of a business that donated surplus food and then being sued for it. Food businesses can also sometimes be reluctant to provide this food to the charitable food sector has limited financial resources. They're often reliant on volunteers, and that can present challenges around communication and disrupting workflow for businesses that want to donate. Especially living in Canada, where we have this enormous land mass, it can be a challenge to access the required transportation and cold storage facilities required to handle any massive quantities of perishable foods. Second Harvest's focus is to facilitate communication between businesses that have surplus edible food and organizations that can coordinate food rescue. Our team leverages partnerships and our online platform to scale food rescue nationally. It also enables businesses and not-for-profits to track your sustainability metrics from their food rescue efforts. I'm now going to hand it over to Mike, who's our local expert on food rescue in the Maritime region, and he's going to tell you a little bit more about our operations and how we put all of this into action.
Great. Thank you, Krish. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for being here. My name is Michael Hardy. I'm the head of operations Maritimes with Second Harvest, and we'll transition a little bit and talk a little bit more about the how. Specifically, we rescue not just kind of in general, but specifically in Nova Scotia and around the Atlantic region. So my day-to-day is really working with both our business partners as well as our recipient partners to either ensure that everything's in place to make sure that they can efficiently donate or safely receive, or to facilitate the donations themselves, as Krish mentioned, either through our platform or brokering, as we'll touch on here in just a moment. Really, the goal of my work is to break down some of those barriers that he's identified and make sure that donating your surplus food is as efficient and cost-effective as we can make it. So currently in Nova Scotia, we work with just under 300 food businesses to capture their surplus food and 115 not-for-profit recipient organizations. And together, since we've started working in the province in 2020, we've been able to rescue over 1.5 million pounds of surplus food and avert 7.1 million pounds of GHGs from the atmosphere. So how have we done that? As Krish mentioned, really trying to take the onus of that communication, of that coordination from you so that your staff can focus on your day-to-day operations and we can help facilitate pickup times, things of that nature, either, again, through myself or our platform. So the first one, kind of doing what we call offline donations, so outside of our online platform. These are typically large donations, palletized donations, things that may be a little bit difficult to put through the app. We can really help by facilitating those and how that would work. Typically, you would give me a call, send me an email, And any way you need to communicate with me, essentially providing me the information about what you have, how it's packaged, any dates on it, any important information around food safety, if there's a particular group you're interested in, any information that you can help me better communicate and better find a good home for that food. And I would take on that burden of communicating with our not-for-profit partners, finding someone that can not only pick up in the time window that you've allocated, but do so safely, whether that means having a refrigerated truck or whatever those needs may be. I can take on that onus to make sure that, again, your staff is freed to focus on the things that they need to do on a day-to-day basis. The second option, and one that is particularly prominent here in the region, is the use of our Second Harvest Food Rescue app. And what this platform allows you to do, input that same information you would provide me, what it is, when you'd like it picked up, and a notification would be sent to our not-for-profit network in your area to claim, pick up, and take back and use in their operations. There are screening questions within the app, so they can serve the same way I would, essentially ensuring those groups have cold storage capacity if it's frozen donation, ensuring that they have other criteria that makes it fit. So again, do they have access to a truck, for example? We make sure that those are factored in when the app is essentially looking for a match for you with your food donation. So the app is a free online platform. It is available all across Canada in both English and in French. And it allows you to either set up one-off donations, a single donation. So you have food now, you need to make it available. You can do it that way. Or if you know in your operations, there are pinch points, once a month, once every couple of weeks, anytime you got new shipments coming in, maybe that's when you call some of your product. You can set up a relationship with a local not-for-profit directly through the platform to have them come and pick up what you have available on that day. The app also allows you to target a particular organization, one that maybe you've worked with in the past or one that you're very particularly interested in working with. And if, for example, they're not set up on the platform yet, you can absolutely get in touch with me and we can get them set up so you can interact with them in the platform. And of course, they can access other opportunities as well. So how it would work, it's simple. You would download the app or you would access it through your web browser. The link there on the screen, we'll share it after. Don't worry, I don't have to jot it down here now. Input some basic information about your business, location, contact information, things of that nature. And then once your account is set up, you can immediately start making those donations available. I will not give a full demo today, but if your business is interested in really getting into the nitty-gritty on how we can set you up effectively, kind of most in the way of an organizational structure with an account and many locations within it, which we'll touch on here in a moment, absolutely we can set that up with your maybe one group or multiple groups on this call in the near future. But just in the sake, or for the sake of time, we won't get into that here today. And if you are interested in registering, you can absolutely reach out to me during that process shortly thereafter, either help with the registration itself or your first donation to make sure that you're comfortable and your team's comfortable using the platform. One other thing that the app does do is it tracks data relevant to your donations in the same location, so you can make it available as well as have data coming back through the platform. As you can see on the left-hand side of your screen, data such as meals provided, value donated, as well as pounds of greenhouse gases averted. Thank you, Krish. All captured in real time with no data management required on your end. You can see there on your dashboard, it is for the last 12 months, but if you're interested in seeing per quarter or over last month or anything like that, you can use the reporting tool that is built into the app to pull that information and use it how you need to, whether that's internal reporting or if that's for promotional opportunities. It is absolutely your data to use as needed. So who can participate? Pretty well any business that has food involved in their work. Of course, we think of traditional food businesses like farmers, producers, distributors, retailers, restaurants, those that are literally food businesses. But we also work with some groups you might not think of, things like film sets, office buildings, event venues. There might be a little bit more work required, making sure that if it's an event venue, that we're keeping food back in the kitchen until it's absolutely needed, so it's not exposed to public touch, risking contamination. Just a few little advanced items to make sure that that food that we're giving to the community is as high quality and of course safe as we can keep it. One group similar to these that we're excited to work with here later this month is the Canada Winter Games in Prince Edward Island. It'll be the first time we're working with the Canada Games, but very excited to capture any surplus food that the athletes don't eat, which probably won't be or might not be a lot knowing how athletes eat. But anything that is left over either from that athletes village or any of the tangential events, we'll be happy to help them facilitate to the Charlottetown or Greater Prince Edward Island community. Just one final note there on that slide, Krish, before we jump ahead. One thing that we've had a lot of success with in Nova Scotia in recent months is prepared food. So of course, we've talked a lot about warehousing and frozen, needing to keep that food below the temperature danger zone. With the situation with prepared food, it's often the opposite. So this is food that was previously frozen. It's been prepared. It can't be brought back down to a colder temperature to be kept safe. It needs to be distributed right away. So with this, it does take some pre-planning, but it's still very valuable food that can get out to the community. So we'll work with that business to identify a partner that typically can pick up in the evenings after their hours are over, ensure that they have the ability to distribute it that same night so that there's no risk of bringing that food back down to temperature. So groups like shelters, for example, that have guests living in their facility at all times can be a great partner for these opportunities. A couple final notes on the platform. There's just a few examples of how you can set it up, and one really great feature about it. You can add additional locations within your account. So if you have many locations across the province, across the region, across the country, these can all fit together in the same account. So you can have everything well organized. You can keep an eye on everything. Even if you want to be the one posting for all of these locations, you're able to do so. Or even if you just want to look at your whole organization as a whole under one lens for reporting, you can also do that as well. You also have the ability to add as many users as you want. So if you want to have an individual at each of those locations, you can do so. We also recommend having at least 2 people on it. Just, someone's busy, someone's out of the office. There is always that person there that can make food available when it comes up. And then finally, a very unique and innovative greenhouse gas calculator developed by us at Second Harvest that helps tally the environmental impacts of your donations. So by category, by weights, all this data is brought through an algorithm in the app. So there's no, again, data management required on your side. So whether you choose to interact with me directly through the app, a little bit of both, it's entirely up to you. We at Second Harvest do everything we can to ensure a very high quality donor experience. Again, no matter what way you choose to interact with us, we have a dedicated food recovery team that helps with those logistics from coast to coast to coast, as well as 14 operational leads in each region of the country, including myself, that can really help to facilitate these in an efficient and cost-effective way, really helping to manage that coordination with those not-for-profits. And then finally, if you are using the platform, a bilingual tech support team available nationally from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. to help with any technical issues that do come up. And here we all are. You can see me taking the lead here in Maritimes. And I should say, I'm joining you here from Fredericton, New Brunswick. So I am in the region, as all of these people are. So if you are an Atlantic group, my colleague Andrew Williams in Newfoundland, Labrador is also available to help, along with Emily Browning in Prince Edward Island. And if you have any operations all across the country, you can see there is someone all across with years of experience that are there to support with those donations. So why donate surplus food really is the question here. So there's a variety of reasons, and Krish did mention there with the financial implications. There's no transactional value added necessarily, but in some reports recently from Champions, actually out of the UK, there is a 14-to-1 return on investment for any dollar spent on donating your surplus food. And this can be from reducing waste collection, it can be from improving your corporate social responsibility, increasing shopper retention. The one that is most interesting to me, and the one that was a bit surprising, is the retention and recruitment of staff members. People like to work for groups that are contributing back to the community and have a good environmental lens to their work. So it's a really powerful tool to keep staff engaged, keep them interested, and keep them at your location long term. And then secondly, why develop a food rescue program? It can really streamline, and we do recommend, whether working with me or setting up the app at your location, having a plan in place long before the surplus may present itself, knowing what it is, when it is, and having a good, solid plan in place. And again, whether that's simply providing them my phone number and saying, hey, call this guy, or, setting them up on the app and they can go in and input it themselves. Again, really streamlining that process. It allows you to track that data and set goals, enhance your existing practices, and maybe you're donating shelf stable and things like that. We can get you into perishable items with some of our resources, and find new partners in your community. You might have some partnerships and maybe you want to expand that. We can help you find those groups as well. And a poll to give my voice a little bit of a break and give you a break from me. So I touched on this a little bit here just before, but which of these foods cannot be donated as part of a food rescue program? Everybody on, here they come. Okay, so food that has been plated for a customer is absolutely correct. Food near or past its best before date is actually an interesting case that we'll touch on here in just a couple slides. And yes, of course, that is the one that we would be focusing on. So well done. So Krish did touch on some of the examples of surplus. Surplus can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, depending on your specific business or just where you fit along that food supply chain, whether that's over forecasting, it could be missed ships, it could be canceled orders, it could be, it's as simple as, you bake too much bread at a bakery. There's a variety of different forms that surplus can take. And we would work with all of those. It's just a matter of setting up the proper way and setting up the most efficient way possible to capture it. A few more examples of things that we wouldn't capture. Of course, the food that has been plated for a customer, anything that's hit a salad bar, for example, anything that's been exposed to public touch and risk contamination, anything in the temperature danger zone for greater than 2 hours, sushi, anything containing alcohol or drugs, or any food with a broken seal, that whether it's a can that has the risk of getting air into it, a rip in the packaging so that there's contaminants that could get in. We would not capture any of those specific categories. So we do have many resources that can help you identify what those resources are at your facility, including a free online training for those that may be interested on helping you identify what it is and making sure that we're making it available when it does come up. I did mention best befores there as part of that poll question. In most cases, and I will say in most cases, we are able to capture food as it approaches and even passes its best before, with the important caveat of assuming that food has been stored and handled properly. We have worked with partners such as the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, as well as public health units around the country to develop the timetable that you see on the right. So by category, how that food should be handled, and then what we can expect that extension of that date to be. I won't get into too much detail here. I'm very fortunate to have Krish, who handles our trainings in this area. So if there are any questions on this, we can absolutely handle them in the Q&A. But with that, we'll just kind of say that this is one of our more popular trainings, and it's something that Krish is very well versed in providing. So certainly happy to address any of those questions as we get to the end. So we've discussed a little bit about what we should and should not make available as part of a food rescue program. So you can feel really good about, again, whether you're at a warehouse and when you're sending it out your door, or if you're at a retail location and someone's coming to pick it up from the counter, you can feel really good about providing that food that you are providing to the community. On top of that, we also work with our not-for-profit partners. And again, these can take many different forms. I mentioned shelters there before. You can already assume that food banks and soup kitchens, kind of your more traditional food not-for-profits, are absolutely part of this. We also work with schools and school boards, First Nation communities, faith-based groups. If they are providing charitable food support to the community and they can do so in a safe way, we do everything we can to make sure that we can support those groups. But you can feel good, and we offer a good amount of peace of mind because we work with those groups to ensure that they know how to safely transport temperature sensitive food, that they know how it should be stored at their facility, handled and distributed. So not only can you feel good about it as it leaves your door, but you know every step along the way that food is being handled in a way that by the time it reaches that end user, it's still in great condition, perfectly safe and great, and can make a big difference in that community. And Krish did touch on liability there earlier, so I won't spend a lot of time on this slide, but you can see there's a little bit more detail about specific legislation in each province. But again, there is no liability for any individual, business, or organization that is donating food across Canada. So whether you're out west or you're here in the east or up in the territories, there is specific legislation to protect food donors that provide food in good faith. And some of the common language is just that, in good faith. No intent to injure, no gross negligence. So it's basically, so long as you're giving good food to the community, you are protected. You can take note of any legislation there that is relevant to your operations, but in Nova Scotia specifically, it is the Volunteer Services Act that covers this specific matter. So just a couple examples, and not specifically there from Nova Scotia, but a couple of our great partners in Prince Edward Island, just to give a bit of a lens of how specifically we help some of our partners. And it's not to say that these are the two options and this is it. We can work with you to develop a plan so that whatever makes most sense for you in your operations, we can develop it and support in making that food available to the community. So this first one is from our great partners at Atlantic Grown Organics, just outside of Kensington, Prince Edward Island. We've been working with them since early 2021, and since then have rescued about 30,000 pounds of surplus, largely tomatoes and cucumbers, which is great product out to the community there in Prince Edward Island. How it works with them, I typically just get an email from my contacts there at the organization, how much, what it is, timelines for when they'd like it picked up, any other important information. We've gotten pretty good. They know exactly what I need in order to make those phone calls. With it being larger donations, however, it's somewhere in the ballpark of about 1,000 to 3,000 pounds, depending on, the surplus that they happen to be faced with that day. It's difficult at times to find one group in their surrounding area in Western PEI to come pick up. So often it's a matter of connecting with multiple groups and lining up maybe 2, 3, even 4 pickups, and we try to get them all around the same time. So those groups can come, pick up, take back. There's no risk of them exceeding their capacity and having that food go to waste at their facilities, while also aligning those pickups so there's at least disruption possible to the operations as well as Atlantic Grown Organics. And even just this morning, there was a pickup made, so they have to update those numbers for the next go around. But no, they've been terrific partners and wonderful produce getting out to the community there in Prince Edward Island. The second example, and again, just to show the contrast and how different these types of food rescue relationships can be, it was a rescue with our great friends at the Murphy Hospitality Group. It was actually their food that they provided to the Cavendish Beach Music Festival this past summer, for those that are familiar in Cavendish PEI. This one did go through the app. It was not through me. So essentially we helped them post early. They didn't know exactly what they were going to have, but they had a good ballpark of roughly what they'd have, certainly the categories and the types of food. So it was a lot of frozen product. So we put it out through the app. We found a partner, and then myself and my colleague Emily Browning, our operations program coordinator in Prince Edward Island, worked with that not-for-profit to make sure that they were prepared, that we knew roughly what it was going to be, but if there was a chance that it was going to exceed their capacity, again, to store that frozen food safely, we actually made a bit of a backstop plan. So we made sure that there was another not-for-profit that was going to be operating that day, so that if there was a situation where they weren't going to be able to take the food safely, we had a means to ensure that there was someone that could. So none of the food went to waste, and certainly there was no safety concerns as well. So in the end, it was slightly over 500 pounds that went to both of those two organizations, and really had a great impact in that Charlottetown community. Shifting back to Nova Scotia, flipping it over to the not-for-profit side. These are a couple testimonials from a few of our partners in Nova Scotia. You may be familiar with these organizations, you may be not. Both have been outstanding partners since early in my time with Second Harvest. And I'll let their words speak for themselves. I won't read them out, but surplus food does have a profound impact, not just providing food to the community, but what it can do is alleviate some of those funds that they may have spent on food otherwise, and actually allow them to, fund another program that they may not have had the funds to do otherwise. No matter if it's big or small, every little bit does contribute greatly to these organizations. And it doesn't even matter what type of food. Of course, we have our emphasis on the nutrient-dense perishable, but some of the greatest stories that I hear back from groups is about some of the treats as well. There was an example, and yes, it is dairy, so it is something that is in our nutrient-dense perishable category, but it was a chocolate milk rescue, and it was about 50 pounds, and the donor wasn't even sure if anyone would be interested at that capacity. We facilitated it, though, to a group in the Halifax area, and they were able to provide it to youth in the community, and the feedback back was that those kids did not remember the last time that they were able to have chocolate milk. So it was not just, nutritional added, but it was this really big morale uplift in the peak of the pandemic that those kids were able to access that treat. So no matter what it is, no matter what the quantity, no matter what, whether you think someone could use it or not, I promise you, it will have a profound impact on the community, with whatever you can provide. And with that, I think we have one more poll that I'll allow Emily to launch. So which legislation in in Nova Scotia protects individuals, businesses, and organizations from legal liability after donating food? The Donation of Food Act, Food Donation and Liability Act, Second Harvest Food Rescue Act, or the Volunteer Services Act? Right, so about 61% did have it right. So it is the Volunteer Services Act there in Nova Scotia. Some of the others, for those that said Donation of Food Act, that is a very common title for it in other jurisdictions, but in Nova Scotia specifically, it is the Volunteer Services Act. And just a couple final slides to wrap up. Some key takeaways from all of this. Only about 4% of the available surplus edible food across our supply chain is currently rescued and distributed to organizations in need. We handle the communication with those not-for-profits to find the perfect match, both in terms of capacity and in terms of safety, for your generous donations. And we have the dedicated operations region teams in your region to support your food donors. And whether that's me or another one of my colleagues, we're all very well versed with our network of not-for-profits to be able to facilitate these donations in a quick and efficient manner. So our promise to you at Second Harvest, we understand the importance of good business and are here to support you in developing a safe, sustainable donation process. You donate surplus food and we'll take care of the rest. And with that, I think that's it for Krish and I. I think we can open it up here to questions, but thank you again for your time and attention today.
Thank you so much. That was awesome. I really liked the local examples. I feel like it really ties it back, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that recognized some of those businesses. So it's great to hear what's actually happening here. For questions, please use that Q&A button, but just to air, I'm sure, a question that's on people's mind, I will share Mike's and Krish's contact information after this. You can expect an email from me that'll have their contact information, some links to additional resources, and hopefully we're going to get this webinar up on our YouTube channel really quick. We did record today and we will share that as well. So if you wanted to forward it on to anybody else that you think would find it very interesting, you can do that. And I see we already have a question. So the first question here is, we are curious what the minimum amount of rescuable food that would be for you to work with. I guess if there's a minimum amount to do a donation, and then as a second to that, do companies get tax deductions for those donations?
I'll take the first one, I suppose, first. There's not a minimum. I guess the only criteria would be that it depends on how close you are to another, or like a recipient organization. They can kind of decide, if it's worth traveling, because of course they have constraints as well. If it's 10 pounds and they need to drive 40 kilometers to get it, it might be a little bit more difficult. The short answer, though, is if there's food available, we'll do everything we can to find it a good home. So it's tough to say there's an exact minimum. I think through the app, we do look for something a little bit north of 5 pounds at least, as a low point. But again, it would really depend on how close an organization is, because if it's 5 pounds and they're just 100 meters away, that's probably doable. But each situation is a little bit unique. In terms of the tax receipting, we do have criteria as an organization around that. Typically, it's with larger donations that becomes an option. I'm happy to share that with you if you want to reach out. Once my contact gets out, we can send that along to you. So you can have a look and we can answer any questions you have, myself and our procurement team.
Perfect, thanks. The next question came in, is Feed Nova Scotia picking up rescued food?
We typically don't divulge specifically who our partners are. I have worked with Justin and the team there at Feed Nova Scotia long enough that they have said, yeah, sure, you can mention that we are part of it. They are a great partner for those larger donations. And of course, then they share it across the province. So great organization doing great work that we can support and connecting with as well. So yes, I guess is the answer to that question.
And if you're interested in seeing more of our partners, you can head to our members public listing on our website at secondharvest.ca, and that shows a number of the donors and the not-for-profits that we work with across Canada.
And just to add to that as well, so I say we don't typically say it because some organizations choose to hide their involvement for one reason or another, and specifically hide their address, even in the app, you know, women's shelters and things like that that don't want their locations to be known. They have the option to hide that involvement. So I just am very careful about saying specific groups, but that's just the added context there.
Yep, that totally makes sense. Another question here, which actually I'm curious about locally, Mike, and then maybe Krish, if you know Canada-wide, but is our grocery stores on board for donating?
Yes. So we have been working with Sobeys Incorporated since May of 2021, going kind of banner by banner. So started with Sobeys. We went through, I think it's Thrifty. Some of them aren't in the region, so I'm not super familiar with all their banners, but Safeway, Thrifty, essentially building out and adding all of their locations. And really with Sobeys Inc., it allows them to kind of standardize what they do. And we mentioned this when we were talking about developing that program and what the benefit is there. So some of their locations may have been doing a great job in providing, you know, this nutrient dense perishable type food. Others were more focused on bread, baked goods, things like that. What we were able to do is to provide those resources and really get them donating more. So even if they had an existing partnership and they were donating already, we were there to kind of help facilitate more getting to that community in those situations. So along with them and Loblaw, yeah, we have most of our larger retailers covered in terms of our partnerships.
And I'll add to that too, it's also smaller grocers. So even just mom and pops and convenience stores, you name it. We work with any type of grocer, any type of food business. It can be a restaurant, it can be a chain. It really doesn't matter. Any food business that has surplus food to donate, we can and will find a home for.
Great, that kind of leads perfectly into this next question. Is high sugar content food frowned upon for donation, specifically something like chocolate or candy?
It can be. It's funny, you guys, I had an example here in New Brunswick where it was right around the holidays and there was a group that had produced a lot of cookies. And so my thinking, not having kids myself, great for a youth program. Called a few of our partners that are youth programs. They put the stop sign on that pretty quick and said, you know what, I'm not doing that. I'd be in so much trouble with all of our parents. Thanks, but no thanks. So I guess that's an important caveat too, just as it's no obligation for the donors to donate at any set frequency, it's also up to that not-for-profit. So whether I call them or it's available through the platform, they can absolutely say thank you, but no thank you to certain opportunities and then, you know, interact with other ones. It's not that we kind of kick them down the list or anything like that. If they say no, it's just if an opportunity comes up and it makes sense for them, we'll keep going back to that. If, you know, even if one or the other doesn't work out. So not that that specifically is frowned upon, but I guess it would just be a matter of finding the right group for it. So of course we want healthy, nutrient dense foods, but as I mentioned with that last example, those treats can be really great too, just to lift the spirits. So we would definitely help find the right home for those specific types of food.
Yeah, I was thinking back to the chocolate milk one, and I was even thinking like both chocolate and candy, because I don't know, I guess it would depend on the person picking it up and their storage, but that would be great to keep around till October. If they're long shelf life products, if there's something they have storage for, and being able to donate around Halloween or Christmas or all the even Easter, like there's all those holidays in between. But I think you were going to add on there, Krish.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, our focus is on those nutrient dense and perishable food items, but even something that is high sugar content, there are people that want to consume those things, and there are not-for-profits that really benefit from them. So I wouldn't say that anything is frowned upon, but we like to find a home for anything that is available. And we work with lots of food businesses that specifically rescue confectionery. Especially if you're using our online platform, it will ask you what types of food you're donating. So not-for-profits are able to see that in advance, and they can determine for themselves whether that food category is right for them, being confectionery, or if they'd rather look for, produce or meat.
Perfect. We have one more, but we do have a few more minutes. So if there was something on your mind, now's the time to put it in so we can get to it while we have Mike and Krish here with us. But the last question that's here right now is there a fee to Second Harvest, and how do you recoup your costs?
No, there's no fee. So we ourselves are a charity. So we are here just to really support in facilitating these donations to, yes, support the community and increase food security, but also to prevent it from going to landfill. Our dual mission of no waste, no hunger really does put the focus on both food security and environmental protection. So we are fortunate that we have some wonderful donor partners, as well as a great development staff that helps fund our ventures. So there's no fee to the business, there's no fee to the not-for-profit. We're really just here to support and facilitate them and get more food out to the community.
Nothing else came in.
No, and I guess just while maybe someone else is typing, we'll see. I mentioned the demo, I mentioned kind of just setting up a call to talk it through about your specific business. Don't hesitate. As you can tell, I do love to talk. So give me a call, send me an email, any list of questions that you or your team have. We can set a time to go through the demo on a Teams meeting, and perfect, it worked. And really make sure that we're tailoring it to your needs and what your team needs to make this as efficient as we can.
Wasn't a question. We just got a really good thank you for the awesome presentation, and they're looking forward to telling everybody they know about it.
Wonderful. We'll take those two.
Exactly. Yeah. So I guess if we have no other questions, we'll wrap things up here. But thank you everybody for tuning in. Again, this was recorded. I will share the link to the recording so you can pass it on. Krish and Michael's information will be in that, so you can get in contact with them. Hopefully we can get more food donated here in Atlantic Canada and Nova Scotia in particular. I think it was really exciting to hear that the Canada Games is a part of it. And let me make sure that's not a question. Maybe it's a thank you. No, it's another thank you. But it's really cool to hear the locals. Really, I mean, it's unfortunately cool, but not cool to hear the stats as well. But I think it does really make it hit home a little bit more that there's definitely some more that we can do. So thank you. If you guys wanted to say any final words, now's your time.
Thank you so much again for having us. Thank you everyone for taking the time to sit through Mike and I talking for an hour. I know that can be a lot, but of course we will be sending out our contact information via Emily. So if you'd like to connect at any point, please do reach out to us, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Awesome. Thank you very much, and have a great day, everybody.